Hi everyone, welcome to the MBN Boston Data Podcast. Today I'm with Rebecca Shaw, Sam Watts, Philip Gaudoin from MetaMetrics. Rebecca's the client service manager, Phil's the managing director, and Sam's the operations director. MetaMetrics is a specialist consultancy that help brands and agencies make data-driven marketing decisions through econometric and modeling, also known as marketing mix modeling. But today, MetaMetrics team is diving into the paradox in the heart of the modern marketing space. So we live in a world where marketeers have access to more data than ever before, yet confidence in decision-making remains surprisingly low. In this episode, we explore why the gap exists and the challenges of common assumptions, of measurement itself. So guys, thanks for joining. Really appreciate your time today. Before we start, if it would be possible just to go around and give a bit more of a full introduction about yourselves, a bit of background, and a bit more detail about MetaMetrics, that'd be great.
Fantastic.
Shall I start?
Go on, you go for it, Rebecca.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for having us. My name is Rebecca Shaw. I'm client service manager at MetaMetrics, and my background is in marketing. I've always had a strong interest in the marketing effectiveness and understanding what truly drives performance. I moved into econometrics about 2 years ago, so quite new to econometrics specifically. Since then, I've just been struck by the value that it can bring to clients. My role primarily is to support clients through the process to ensure they have a good experience, and then they can apply the econometrics results after the process. So that's me.
Yeah, I'll go next. Fine. So I'm Sam, operations director of MetaMetrics. I've been at MetaMetrics for 14 years now. So my background before that was at media agencies. I've always worked in the econometrics world. Actually, I left finance after a couple of years deciding that wasn't for me. Came into the joyful world of econometrics, first of all in media agencies, and then I joined MetaMetrics about 15 years ago. My role, MetaMetrics, is I lead the delivery aspect, really. So making sure that everything happened. MetaMetrics themselves been around now for nearly 20 years. We've always been an econometrics agency. It's what we specialize in. So we've seen the growth, apparent death, and regrowth of econometrics as it's happened, really.
So I'm Philip from MetaMetrics as well. I've been in the company since 2016. My background before that was in the media agency. Sam and I go back to 2005, 2006. We both cut our teeth at Publicis within Publicis Group, and we've known each other. It's quite a small industry since then. But prior to that, I was an academic, so I taught econometrics to undergraduates, mostly very reluctant undergraduate students, and taught them how to get through their econometrics exams each summer. Quickly realized that wasn't for me, and I wanted to do something more practical and real world with it. And so I've ended up in this industry, and I've enjoyed it since. So that's my story.
Thanks, guys, for the introduction. As well, I know we've been collaborating for a few years now, but I didn't realize the history with MBN as well too. I know you all know Michael, our CEO, and looked like he worked with you probably 14 years ago as well too, in the wonderful world of econometric modeling. So there's a long-standing history there. So we'll probably get into what has changed the industry. Actually, that's one of my first questions, to be honest with you, is the changes or the apparent similarities between 10 years ago and now as well too. Because sometimes people think econometrics or market science hasn't changed, but I'm sure it has in the past. So what I wanted to do is to set the scene and ask the question. It's around what's changed in how organizations approach measurement to compared to 5 to 10 years ago when you guys were in industry.
Who's going to go first? Who's going to be brave?
I think coming from a data side, it's quite an interesting world, isn't it? If you go back 5, 10 years, it's not just that there's been more data than there was 10 years ago. More data is fine most of the time. It's like the data we're getting is much more fragmented, inconsistent, noisy, messy data. Back when I first started doing econometrics, slightly more than 10 years ago, it was very much about just looking at a bit of TV and seeing, does that drive your sales? Nice and easy. And modeling was key because that's the only way to do it. What's happened over the intervening period is two things. There's been more analytical approaches deployed. So all the worlds of digital attribution, spot match, all these weird and wonderful different attribution approaches. So there's a proliferation there, but there's also been a proliferation of data. So more channels, more fragmented channels, smaller. And if you look at a media plan now, it's not got 5 channels on it. It's got 50 channels on it. Makes it just that bit harder to separate the signal from the noise, I think is where the world's got to. So it's interesting. I don't think we're using wildly different approaches most of the time. The underlying approaches, the stats of it are quite similar. It's just where that's sitting in the mix of analytical tools is different. And also the data we're putting into it is certainly different.
I think I'd agree with that. Josh, to your point that you said earlier on, you were sure that it's changed. In many ways, actually, not as much as you think. I'd say econometric modeling, whatever you call it, is a bit of an old warhorse now, actually. We do joke about this with clients. It's still here. It's survived. And I think that's in recognition that what it does is still something that no other approach does still. And so that's why we've had generations of new things come along, and they've all added value in their own way. But nothing that's really replaced what econometrics does, which is that ability to look at everything on the same level playing field. I think the way models are built has changed and yet not changed. So it's changed in that there's more automation possible, but automation is not a new thing. I don't think anyone watching should think automation equals AI equals new equals brave new world. We're aware of automated modeling solutions that go back to the early noughties, until really when I started out in this business. The bit that hasn't changed, though, is the need for humans to interpret it and to make sense of it. And quite honestly, to persuade clients that what they're looking at is a credible, believable model that makes sense, that they can lean on and use in their work. So I think that bit, in a way, hasn't changed. And in fact, that from a client point of view, there's much more receptivity to this. So when I started out, there was reluctance in some quarters to engage with this. It was seen as a bit of a necessary evil. And I think we've seen a sea change now. Marketers are much more forward thinking about this. They engage with it. Maths and stats is not why a lot of people go into marketing. Absolutely fine. But there is the interest. We have clients who say, we want our media plan to be steered by the science, informed by the science from the get-go. It's not an afterthought and a kind of tick box exercise. We actually want to know what it's saying. So I think that's some of the change that I've seen in the last few years, for sure.
I think from my perspective, econometric modeling, marketing science, measurement, whatever you want to call it, it has been a constant through my career, and it hasn't changed too much in terms of what good looks like. And I think that's because marketing science has kind of been future-proofed from its start point, being having individuals who need to be stakeholder focused and at the front of the client's mind as well too, where you've got roles within data science, data analytics, customer insight, digital analytics that have fallen by the wayside slightly or amalgamated into what we know now as maybe an AI engineer or an analytics engineer. So it is a constant. So I think I definitely agree with you. I think it's the same, but there's more tools now to be added, but the question still remains the same. And that does come to my next question. Sam did touch on this point in his answer as well too, and it's to do with more data. Obviously, we've got more data now than we had previously. So why is confidence in marketing decisions still so difficult? And I want to know from your perspective as well too, from what with your clients, where does this lack of confidence show up in your process?
Rebecca, perhaps you should go first on this. You didn't get a voice in the last time. Yeah. So do you want to talk to this first?
Yeah, I'd say looking back over the years, the data is obviously more rife now than it's ever been. So data is not the problem. It's almost like econometrics hasn't changed that much. It's the world around us that's slightly changed. And so more and more clients are coming to us, especially people like charities, where they've got to make every pound work, and there's a real focus on efficiency. So I think data has enabled lots of more clients to come to us. But actually, I think now it's not, is there a lack of data? I think it's about, do we trust the data? What source is actually the truth? And so I think it's finding our way through the data. Sam, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think there's a degree with more data. Quite often what happens is more analysis. And what then happens is analysis paralysis, in effect. You've got 4 or 5 different types of analysis, all saying slightly different things, all at slightly different levels, all being driven by slightly different teams sometimes within a business. And it needs a human aspect to go, I'm going to take this bit from here, this bit from here, and actually bring it all together into some sort of consolidated view of the world. So more data it gives, yes, more signals, but it also creates more noise, I think. So I think it takes that human aspect to tie it all together, really, and actually think, what's this bit good for? What's this bit good for? And where am I going to get to the overarching, this is a question we're trying to answer. Therefore, I'm going to use this approach, rather than it just being another dashboard of metrics and data, which is great, but they don't tend to answer your questions for you.
I'd agree. I think, and I'd probably go a bit further actually, if I may, on that, because I think one thing is that if you take sets of data and you combine them, you do analysis, you create more measurements, KPIs, more metrics. You're multiplying data. You're not reducing it. And I think the bit that perhaps we've not done well as an industry, if I can say that, the measurement industry has not always served our clients well in terms of reducing this down to what matters for them. And that needs critical thinking, discrimination between types of data, and saying, look, there's 100 things you could track. This is your problem. This is what matters. This is what will help you with your problem. So I think there's a sense in which we've not always helped the cause, I think. And I think partly is the sort of people that we are in this business. So we're often very analytical people, and our default answer is more modeling. We will go to more solution, more modeling, whereas actually what we've seen, and certainly the way we try and operate at MetaMetrics, is that a solution to the problem, the modeling bit, the analytical bit, is only the beginning. It's only part of it. It's a jumping off point, we would always say, for what follows. And actually, how do we get that solution adopted? How do we support clients of executing it? How do we make sure they've got the proof and evidence so that they stick with it? We've got clients who would say to us, we know what the answer is. You can't really tell us. I would be surprised if your models told us something that we didn't know. But the problem we have is that we started off down this journey. We ran into some unintended consequences. Management then got a bit wary of it and reverted to type. So that's a persistence problem. And I think they're having the correct diagnosis and saying, look, it's actually, that's not a modeling problem. More modeling is not going to help with that. But having specifically solving for how we give clients that confidence and how we help them persevere and persist through setbacks, that's the particular challenge there. So I think there's a degree of that we reflect on the industry and think, yeah, and our best, I think the industry's done great things for clients. But I think the whole level, I think we could collectively do more to serve our clients better and make sure that they're really benefiting from the work that we do.
Yeah, that's good insight. What I found as well, and I'm keen for you to challenge me on this, we've had people in the lofty worlds of data science and AI but I think because they're not in that world, they don't sometimes see it as a go-to option for their team or their specific way of working. And I think that the issue might be between measurement versus application. And I think that's something I want to ask you guys about when it comes to market effectiveness. Is it a measurement problem? Is it an application problem? What does that even mean? And where does the breakdown typically happen between insight and action?
I have a view. I think I'll go first on this one. I think it's case by case. I think it's not right to say that it's never a measurement problem. Sometimes it is a measurement problem. So sometimes when we engage with clients, the situation you give is palpably the best thing we can do for them is to tell them the answer to the problem. And often the appetite is there in those clients and they will take up what we tell them and use it and apply it on their own. Other situations, it's very much the reverse. It's not a measurement problem. It's an adoption problem. And why don't people act on it? And it's human at the end of the day. The reason why people don't act, the reason why people do act is because they understand, they trust, they believe, they're convinced. And that's almost, I think, where it fails. While it can fail anywhere, I think it's more the case of the adoption. And it's probably because when I think, again, we build models, the industry as a whole doesn't always think about the engagement and adoption from the start. And the solution needs to be tailored with that in mind. We've seen too many debrief decks that have things like, you could do this, you could do that. You might want to consider this, consider testing this. And to me, that's a bit of an evasion. That's a little bit of get out of jail. It's letting ourselves off the hook. Actually, what we should be doing is putting ourselves in the client's position going, look, given everything that you've told us, given the work we've done and the numbers we've got, this is what you should do. This is our recommendation. And this is how you would execute it in practice. And it might cause you these problems. So this is how we de-risk the transition. How do we know it's succeeding? Here are some things you can track on the route. So it's thinking through the whole journey and engineering the whole solution, not just the analytics bit and saying, let's build some models and get some numbers out. And that's the bit we naturally, as people, we all get excited by, I think.
I think sometimes there's a misalignment between what the client needs, what they are able to talk to you about and specify it to you, and then what analysts will just default to. And if those things don't all line, the client comes and says, yeah, I have these questions. Sometimes there's actually underlying questions from those questions. There's a second layer you've almost got to dig into to actually get to the root cause of what the questions are. And then there's a tendency for analysts to just go, oh, I reckon they want a model. I'll just build a model. Not really thinking about the structure of a model, what the outputs are. With any given set of data, you can build different flavors of models, different focuses, different areas where you dig deeper into or shallower. And sometimes I think analysts aren't the best at listening. Essentially, we go, oh, chance to build a model. I'll go build a model without really listening to what the client really needs. And particularly if the client's not an analytical person, which often they're not, but they can't translate it to the analyst. The analyst isn't really trying to translate it themselves. So there's almost a misalignment between them, which means, we build a model. It's a good model. Mathematically, statistically, it passes all the tests. It ticks the boxes. We got all the standard outputs, but it hasn't quite hit the mark in terms of answering the question the client needs to make fundamental changes in their business or improve their business, which is obviously what we're here for. There's nothing worse to me than an econometric project where someone says at the end, oh, that's very interesting. And that's it. There's nothing worse than an interesting project. It's got to have some sort of impact, change. That's what we're really looking for.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I think at MetaMetrics, what we do quite well is really the stakeholder engagement. So at the beginning of a project, I always start any presentation by saying it begins with a question. So like Sam says, what are your questions? What do you want to get out of this? And I think it's about engaging not just the core team, the insights team, perhaps, who are running the project. It's really reaching out to all the stakeholders. And we'll have stakeholder calls and ask people what they think about what's going on, what are their hypotheses, and really get their insights, because insights without sort of application at the end of it it's almost a negative thing for us, really. We want to be able to help people with their application of it. And the best way that we found to do that is to build relationships with clients, really understand what their problems, issues are, what their thoughts are, and how we can use the insights to elevate the organization to the next level. So it's a really important part of what we do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, just going back to the first point I made, it's econometrics and marketing professionals have been at the forefront of that for quite a while. It's a forward-facing role. You're not going to find a back office econometrician who just wants to build models. I'm sure some people prefer the technically minded, but they're still shoved in front of the client as well too, to figure out what the problem is and to obviously try and solve that solution face to face in a consultative capacity. So I think that's why, and it goes into my next point, is the resurgence of econometrics. That's why it's probably doing better than ever right now in the industry. I've got a theory on this. I'm not going to go into detail because I'm non-tech.
Let's hear it.
But the resurgence of econometrics, right? I don't think it's left. And I've been working hand in hand for 14 years in econometric modeling in terms of hiring people in this space. It probably has, I would say, post-COVID, there has been a slight resurgence, I would say, in terms of activity. I mean, there's not a day goes by where an organization doesn't want me to help them find an econometrician or a professional in this space, because there just frankly isn't enough of them anymore, which we can go into in a bit of detail. But one of our theories, because it's focused on, a lot of the time it's on behaviors, customer behaviors, there's been a decrease in my perception, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, from a lot of these larger customer insight organizations when it comes to customer behavior, or maybe it's changed. But also, do you think the impact of digital analytics, Google analytics, I wouldn't say being diminished, but changing in a way where it's impacted the industry, has increased the use case for the role within econometric marketing and modeling?
I think you raise an interesting point. I don't think it's ever gone away. I think it's been talked about as if it's gone away. One of the first things I did, I went to the global ROMI, Return on Marketing Investment Conference in Florida in 2006. That was pretty much when I first joined this business, this industry. The first thing I heard was econometrics is dying. 20 years later, it's still here. And what's happened is that we've had, in that way that is an unfortunate side effect of perhaps bits of our industry, people come up and say, this is the new thing. Everyone gets very excited, realizes, having learned from it actually, that it does something, but it doesn't do everything they want. And it doesn't replace, critically doesn't replace what econometrics does. And so I think people have been around that loop and have not have come back to the same point. So I agree, it hasn't gone away. We haven't seen it come away. We've heard it talked about as if it's going away. It's been surprisingly resilient. And it comes back to the point, there's nothing else that does quite what econometrics does. If there was, we'd be interested in it because we're in the marketing effectiveness business. We're not wedded to one tool or technique. We do econometrics because it does what it does. So I think there's some truth certainly in what you're saying there.
Just again, this is probably a technical question. What questions does econometric modeling answer really well, and what can't it do? And I've got to put it in at some point. AI, I've got to put it in every podcast, obviously. Is there anything in place right now in the space that you guys are aware of that might be beneficial with the use of AI within, or is it just not there yet right now?
So I'll jump in on the first one, what is good and bad at, because I think it's important. It's not the kind of silver bullet. It doesn't answer every single question. It's not do an econometric model and you'll never have to worry about your marketing ever again. It's much more nuanced than that. The things that it's good at and the things where it's used well, I think, are when it's answering big strategic questions. It's answering what's driving your growth and how can we push that further in the future? What's the true ROI of every channel, and in a consistent fashion, not taking your meta results from your meta analytics, your Google results from DB360, and all having slightly different approaches. It gives you that one consistent approach to it. Where econometrics is, when it's used well, is in its nature, econometrics is a backward-looking thing. You're looking at what's happened in the past. The value in econometrics is not really in the past. It's in the how do you flip that around and look at the future. So it can really help budget allocation going forward. What should we do differently next year to maximize returns? It's that sort of strategic question, I think, that's really where econometrics plays really well. Aligned to what it doesn't do, which is probably even more important, actually. It's not an always-on daily reporting tool. It's not something you should be logging in every day and seeing the results of your econometric model. Typically, we're looking at 3 years of data on a weekly basis, so roughly 150 data points. If you're adding one data point, that's not going to fundamentally change the model. So if you're looking on a weekly basis, you're not getting a lot of new information. You're just looking at essentially a bit of noise from last week. That's not what it's for. It's not a real-time optimization tool. There's lots of in-platform stuff that can do that for you. Other things it can't do, obviously can't tell you the impact of something you've never done. We do get asked that question. Oh, we've never done TV, but how would that work for us? We can give you some best estimates from benchmark, etc. But it can't answer that question. And I think, which kind of leads to the other areas of analytics, really. What econometrics can be used really is a framework for all your other tools as well. So if you've got spot matching on TV, you've got digital attribution modeling going on in your digital channels, you've got standard direct mail tracking based on addresses. They're all brilliant at doing kind of in-channel optimization. What econometrics is brilliant is that strategic viewpoint of going, and these are how they all work together. This is how much you should do of direct mail. This is how much you should do of TV compared to your paid search. So that's where I think econometrics works. It's slightly elevated above that in a more strategic world.
Okay. And just going into my next question as well too, I just don't see it from the job descriptions I get or the requirements I get. There's nothing integrated when it comes to AI that's a requirement right now within this space still, compared to data science, obviously AI engineers, but even data engineering, it's creeping into every facet of what I hire for within data. The only one that isn't is econometric modeling. So what's happening in that space?
I think you're right. And I think we had the view that AI will effectively eat from the bottom, if we can put it rather brutally like that. And it's the automated, repeatable, unfun tasks that no one likes doing. Yeah. And because they're unfun, no one minds automating them. I think where the rubber hits the road is AI becomes shorthand for a kind of sophisticated type of automation, one that deals with fuzzy situations where you don't have exact mappings. And so by bringing that simulated intelligence, it helps get around that. It makes guesses. It works by making guesses, statistical guesses. And so it can help with some of that. But it doesn't do the interpretive bit. It doesn't do the higher value stuff. It doesn't really pick out the right question. It doesn't listen to clients, extract what really matters, probe, ask the right questions. It has a tendency, particularly if you use ChatGPT, it's very affirmative. Whatever you say to it, hey, that's great. That's a really good idea. And it makes you think that it knows the answer. It's over definite. As soon as you challenge it, so when you push back and you say, hang on, what about this? What about that? It pivots and changes its mind. I'm sure we've all seen that kind of behavior. It makes you feel great, but is it right? And so I think that bit of it, the human bit, the interpretation, the problem framing is key, and it just doesn't do that very well. I think even if you ask ChatGPT, does it do it very well? It will probably tell you it's not very good at doing that. So it's honest enough to tell you that. So I'd say that's probably why we haven't seen it. It remains a very manual, human-centric process. And in a way, the modeling software, the platform, we've seen things like Facebook's Robin and Google's Meridian. The platform it's only ever cost a few £100 for a bit of stats software. It never costs more than that. But the people who know how to build the models, to make what to look for in the models, to make intelligent decisions between model type, model A, model B, or this variable, that variable, and explain those and justify those to clients. That's the bit, that's the magic, that's the secret sauce, if you like. It's not easily AI'd.
Yeah, I was going to say that a good modeler, if you give them a data set, can probably make 10 different models, all which pass the same tests. The human bit and the bit that AI will struggle with is aligning which model answers for questions, which ones just make logical sense, which ones do we actually believe? Because we don't live in a world where the data we use for econometric models in marketing is actually good data, actually. It's not set up in structured tests. It's all at once, it's aligned, it's correlated, all the things that if you ask Phil comes from academia, if you ask an academic to look at it, they go, oh, no, you can't possibly model this because X, Y, and Z. The data's just not suitable. So AI would struggle to be able to unpick those bits, I think.
I'm going to steal a quote, and it was, AI understands text, humans understand context, which I thought basically answers all the questions when it comes to this type of scenario. Niall Roundtree said that, and I was at an event, and I was like, yeah, that's boss, that's mega. And I think it's true through every facet of data right now. I think humans we're not going to go into it, but we're required. There is a stopgap, and there's limitations right now. And I think within your world, I think it's more prevalent than ever that a person is at the front of that as well too.
To jump in on that, if I can, just for quickly, I've got a very good example of that. So we worked with a client, I won't name names, but we worked with a client where quite honestly, our best consulting advice was not to put into practice some of the things the model said. So she's an intelligent lady. She looked at the model. She said, this is what it's telling me to do. And actually, as a marketeer, I agree with it. I think that's right. But politically, it wasn't right in her organization. She would have been exposed. She would have been setting herself up for a failure. And so once I'd heard all that context, my best advice to her was, look, leave it for a year. I think you're right. I think we'll get to the right answer. But if you do it now, it risks failing. And then the failure will be seen as a failure of the advice and the failure of the change in strategy, rather than actually what's happening is something in the market, some headwinds in the market. Let the headwinds go. When you get to a better situation, then put it into practice. Now, that's your context point in there. It's not doubling down on the model finding, it's saying, look, this is the right finding. Now is not the right time for it because of the broader context. So let's be smart about this.
100%, yeah. I think, and there's, the examples are numerous as well too when it comes to even in my world as well. It's a simple, you guys would probably be at the brunt of it as well too sometimes. An email probably is not as good as a call, or even an automated messaging is not as good as someone meeting someone face to face. So there's things in that capacity where we use AI where I'm like, it's even note-taking tools. I'm going off on a whim here, but I don't know about you guys, but the amount of times I jump on a Teams call or an online call and I see an AI note-taker and I'm like...
We provide AI, corporate AI for the team because it's got a value. One bit of advice I always say to the team is don't outsource your thinking. Don't outsource your judgment.
Exactly. It's perfect.
Use it to stimulate, use it to converse with, use it to proofread, use it to check, but don't let it replace your thinking because it will just, it gives you something that sounds great. You go with it, but you just haven't really thought it through. And then when you get the first challenge, it will be, oh, I don't know. I haven't really considered that. So that process of going through is key.
100%. And there's definitely a recent example of that where I'm going, I'll go and use ChatGPT to do this for me, maybe not sending an email without doing that and going, oh my God. So, it's a bit close to home, that one. But it can do the thinking for you and it does dumb you down. It does. Whether incrementally it can. So I think it's important. But I'm going off on a tangent. I want to get back into the wonderful world of econometrics and cutting through the noise, which is, I'm keen for Rebecca to answer this one. And with going back to data, with so many metrics available within industry, notwithstanding AI. How could you help clients focus on what actually matters within industry right now?
For me, it goes back to the question. When we do a debrief, there are so many results. There are so many insights. Every channel has got ROIs, diminishing return curves, and there's so much that sometimes I think supporting people with that process of just digesting it and having another kind of call to follow on. But then it's about going back to that question and going, we've got all these insights, and what are the key things? When we go back to the question, what do we first want to know? And how can we really focus on what matters? One of the things that clients say to me about the benefits of econometrics is getting the wide view of everything. And lots of organizations don't see, first of all, they don't see their data in that way. And they certainly don't get a kind of holistic view that Sam was talking about. So I think it's about stripping it back, going back to basics. What are the key questions? And then setting up a sort of a framework for sort of test and learn. And we work very closely with media agencies as well. So we will liaise with the media agency, we'll look at their planning and really support in terms of, okay, what's the baseline? What are we testing against? How are we going to know if there's an improvement or based on their sort of core objectives? So even though there's a lot of data and there's a lot of results, I think ultimately it's about paring it back to what really matters and setting up a process of let's test it, let's find the baseline, let's see it, does it work? And then we can rerun the models, and then it provides people with evidence. I think for me, the value that I'd really seen econometrics bring to organizations is it helps them make confident decisions. It's not just, oh, we think this. It's actually, we tested this, we tried it, we've got the evidence, we know that this happens. Let's put some more money behind it. Let's make the right investment because we've got a little bit of evidence now. And then let's test it and let's do more of what works and let's not do what doesn't work.
That's great. And that comes into my next question, Rebecca, as well, too. And the word for me, metrics, will mean something completely different to you guys. Metrics to me is many moons ago, doing 4 hours a day on a phone, KPI-driven sales environment, as we once were. We're not anymore.
You're showing your age.
I told Michael 10 years ago, I'm going to go do an hour's worth of a podcast with the metrics guys and be like, that's not going to be added on top of your call times. So, it would have been nice to have vocational thing. And metrics change with time. And what I thought good looked like from managing teams and from didn't reflect into the actual outcomes or input. So I can guarantee you that's going to be the same on your side too with your clients. So are there metrics that you consistently see that are overvalued, like call times, or distracting from real world outcomes?
I think on the social side is probably where we see there's a lot of activity type metrics which show engagement, they show shares, they show stuff going on. And because it's immediate and it's available, you can log in, you can see it almost minute by minute. It's quite seductive. And you can, oh, look, there's a spike in interest. There's 1,000 people have liked, 2,000 people have shared. You can look at that. And I think what we find, and we're not the only ones who say this, what we hear senior commercial people in client companies say, that's great, but when our marketers come with those as numbers, as proof, we ask the obvious question, which is, what value is that? What did it do for me? What did it actually achieve? So let's model that through to commercial outcomes, to what we really care about, to what the organization cares about. It's great as a leading indicator, but I think it's almost that gets elevated and put in the wrong place, and it becomes a measure of success, which it really isn't. And then that undermines marketing's credibility in the organization. So I think that there's a lot of distraction value in that. The other area I'd flag is probably, dare I say, PPC. PPC, with the best will in the world, a lot of PPC is the equivalent of somebody, a very helpful shop assistant, holding open the door as you approach the shop. You probably would have made it inside anyway. It's nice, they've reduced the friction, they've taken out some steps in the journey. That's great, but actually with enough intentionality, you probably would have got inside the shop, and that can be an enormous distraction as well. So we'll have some conversation where we'll present econometric based attributions, and some clients will say that's different from that, doesn't match up with what we see in PPC. No, it doesn't. And one of these answers, the econometrics or the GA, is probably closer to the truth. I'll give you a hint which one it is, but we do have that friction still. So I don't know, Sam, if you'd add to that at all, what you're saying.
Yeah, no, we often talk about kind of true drivers and harvesters. There's certain channels which are, as Phil said, are right at the bottom of the funnel quite often, and they're brilliant at just hoovering up and harvesting interests for a business. It's not to say there isn't value in that. It's defensive value in it. If you're not buying your brand terms, your competitor could be, for example. So there is some value in that. But if you look at it on a pure linear basis, they are normally hugely overvalued. So analytically, there's ways of dealing with it. The two extremes are you put it in a model and it says, yeah, this is the most important channel. Great, massive high ROI. Let's plow our money into brand PPC. One option. The other extreme is that you don't put it in a model at all and say there's zero value to it, which is probably not true either. So it's trying to find a path in between the two, which is much closer to the truth. So we often do what we call a nested model, for example, where you understand the role that something like brand PPC has at driving sales. We also understand how the role of other media channels are in terms of driving brand PPC. So you understand that path of someone starts seeing a TV ad, they then go to brand PPC, they then go on to purchase. So give them a credit to both steps in the path, not just for TV or just for brand PPC. It's the synergy of the two that matters.
Over the years, you've brought it up now, so PPC I've not heard of or seen in a long time. I used to recruit PPC specialists, SEO analysts, conversion rate optimization specialists, and then a variety of like web or digital analytics. God help you if you call someone a digital analyst and not a web analyst. They were separate as well too, and you're like Omniture and web trends and all this stuff. And it was social media analytics. There was industry set up where we would help them find social media analysts. I'm sure they do it to a certain degree, but there was specific social media listening tools I'd be looking for, all sorts of crazy stuff. That was 9 years ago. I just don't see it anymore. In terms of if I was to do a team build and they asked for an econometrician, they would ask for all that as well too. And I feel it's a lot of noise and a lot of clutter. So has simplifying metrics led to a better decision? Because it looks to me like econometrics has survived all that and it's still ringing true in terms of what it's been able to deliver.
I think it's a case of what is left standing at the end of all of that. New things are always exciting. We look at new things too. We like shiny new things. Who doesn't? But it's actually what provides value, fundamental economic value. And I remember the social media measurement age coming at 2012. I think it was around then.
Yeah,
it was all it boomed, exploded then. And doubtless we've got to a position where you get that sort of hype cycle. I think it's the Gartner hype cycle, and then it comes down to a reality. So I think it is tempered down to, and now a lot of it is systems. A lot of it is reporting. People realize that these are at best early indicators of engagement with your campaign. They're not necessarily levers you can push on, because organic social is what it says. It's organic social. It flies because it's something that's got social currency, not because you can seed it, but you can't really. There's a limit to which you can push it. So it's not necessarily very actionable. And also the value of these things commercially. What's the value in translating through to sales? A lot of it can be noise. You've got lots of buzz and noise, but people go out and buy a different product, or they do what they would have done anyway. So I think it's more a question of what's left standing. Every generation, I think, in the time we've been in it, I've seen agent-based modeling do the rounds, neural net modeling, social media metrics, or digital revolution. And each time we've been left with something which is valuable at the end of it, but nothing else doing that fundamental job of what is driving your sales. How do you engineer growth in your organization, apart from good old. So that'd be my take on that.
I was just going to add in, Josh, to basically the new kid on the block now is the LLM data that brands are starting to collect. So how prompts are being used, how obviously brands are being shown up in the results of the chat. And we've not included that data in any models yet, but it is coming because obviously media teams are harvesting this data. It's obviously very, very valuable. So that's a new kid.
Again, this is where econometrics, because it is data agnostic, it can absorb any sort of data. So when we start getting impression data from AI-based search, as Rebecca's mentioning, that will go in a model to see how well it correlates with sales. What's the relationship between that and sales? Does it seem to drive sales? Or is it only just revealing that people are interested anyway? So it's not causal, it's just responding because people are already searching. So in principle, those things will go within, because econometrics is just data, it's just statistical relations that we interpret, obviously, and put that layer around.
That's great. I was hoping one of you would have done the MBN Boston data bingo there. We've already mentioned AI. It was big data, which is obviously the one.
Oh, yes, big data, yeah.
How could you forget about that? Banging my head against the wall against that one. And then obviously computer vision was another one. It was constant computer vision this, computer vision that. But just swiftly moving on in terms of brand versus performance. The tensions between brand and performance have been around for years, so it's nothing new. But how does it show up in your client work today? And have you got any examples where measurement has helped bring those two together?
Brand versus performance, big one. I think here there's been an element of overclaim. Every few years, somebody comes up and claims to have cracked the brand measurement problem. And by which I mean able to put a full and comprehensive value on the value of brand and therefore the value of brand building activity. And I don't think it exists out there. I'm not sure if it's possible, because if you think about what it needs, brand is the sum total of all of our interactions with a brand, with a name. And how do you evaluate that over many years and all the complexity? It's what I hear down the pub. It's my experiences. I get in a friend's car. I have an impression of that car. How does that get tracked? How does it get in the model? So I think it's, philosophically, it feels like it's one of those things that's never going to be fully answered. But I think the problem is sometimes we do get people pop up occasionally who say, oh, we can tell you the full value of brand. And then what they end up doing is a slight partial thing and saying, actually, we found a bit of brand value. Or they end up making some very heroic assumptions, which are essentially assumptions. So I think what we do at MetaMetrics, we're very clear about what we can and can't say and how far to take the interpretation. And then to contextualize that within the brand space in which clients operating. So if we're giving advice which says performance media is working incredibly well, what we're very aware of is, okay, we don't want that to be taken as therefore rob the brand side of the business. So what is the right balance? Can we get some steers from the modeling to help with that? Also, can we use our experience and judgment so that we can help clients find a balanced path through? Because what we don't want to see is clients shooting themselves in the foot, going after short-term performance media. And we've seen it. Some clients, working with the clients at the moment, who stopped doing brand advertising and they're seeing a result of it. They saw the result of not doing it. They did the test that no one does, in effect, which is pull the brand advertising and then see what happens to all of their KPIs. So, yeah, it's a vexed topic. And I think it would be disingenuous to claim that anyone has the sort of silver bullet on it.
Econometrics is great at the short term. And by short term, I mean what drives sales this week, next month. So quite often what we're doing is making sure we're fully optimizing the performance media, almost to free up budget and take the pain away from a brand media. So it doesn't have to be as, if you're going to judge your brand media just against that, you're going to end up canceling your brand media, because if your brand media is getting a higher ROI than your performance media, something's a bit wrong in either your brand media or your performance media. It's either not actually brand media or you're doing your performance media badly. So quite often what we're doing is making sure we're fully optimizing the performance media via Econometrics, which can do one of two things. It can free up budget to allow them to kind of risk-free do some brand media, or it's just making sure that the performance is doing so well that almost a brand doesn't get a free pass because it's still got to do something, but it's not necessarily judged against ROI. And I think it comes back to what Phil's saying, is that it's about judging things fairly to the role they're doing. And econometrics isn't always the right answer for that question. It's recognizing, as I said, it's not a silver bullet. It won't answer every single question. Anyone who says it can is being a bit, as Phil, disingenuous. If the question is, how am I building my brand? There are better ways than econometrics. Econometrics can help. It can give you some hints. We can look at brand tracking, nesting into models in the same way I talked about brand PPC, but it's not the perfect answer to understand how a brand has been built over the last 100 years, for example.
We get quite a lot of referrals from media agencies who are working with clients, and obviously they want the insights to be able to plan better media for them, which is great because quite often we come across brands that have done an amazing job building their brand on the performance channels and really seeing some incredible growth, maybe like since COVID, and focused their marketing on performance. really well, but they plateaued in terms of where they are. And the media agency had gone, look, 6 months ago that we wanted to make the case for investing in brand. And they weren't quite sure. The client was a little bit, performance marketing has done so well. However, the clicks are going up and it's almost to the point where TV is on a similar level, but they don't quite believe it. And so media agency will introduce us. We will run the econometrics for them, and we can actually evidence the impact of that brand that they started doing 6 months ago. And actually, it's showing a huge benefit, and it's really interesting to see. And then again, it gives the case for more investment based on actual numbers that become apparent.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. There's brands that brand loyalty it's a weird one, because you can do as much as humanly possible when it comes to attribution and measurement within this space to target the right individuals. And there's certain brands that have got my number and I will buy everything that comes out. But then one advert where you might call yourself an ethical company that's all about nature and sustainability, and then you partner with an artist and you blow up half a mountainside with fireworks, which disrupts the natural habitat, is going to put me off for the rest of my life. That may or may not happen with a certain brand. So it doesn't matter. All the work you could do in that space can get ruined by another department or a decision someone else has made that can really affect the statistics as well too. So it's only as good as the brand that you work for and the decisions that others make as well too.
Yeah. So specifically, if it's the reputational aspects of brand, we sometimes see adverse PR having an effect. There's a case that I can think of from slightly dim and distant past now, but in which we calculated that 30p in every pound of the client's budget was going to offset the effect of negative PR. And that sounds like a lot. If I told you the client, it would immediately make sense. But we see effects, not usually as catastrophic as that. But to your point, that it does interact, because then you're having to work harder on the paid space to offset what is happening out there in the world. So because somebody let a situation develop that's generated adverse PR, and it's very difficult to get that milk back in the bottle.
It happens, but it's almost like you can't buy that type of brand loyalty these days. It seems people are more, they go with what they want to go with based off the data that's put in front of them. It's less and less of a loyalty, I would say, in industry. And that's probably a statistic that you guys probably don't measure as much, I would imagine.
It's got a very mixed, I think the brand model of the world is changing. So there was what all marketeers were trained in a certain way, coming up to look at brand in a certain way. And there's a sort of textbook view of marketing, which you could go to a marketing textbook, you will get from it. And then with the bar and chart work, how brands grow, that empirically challenged a lot of the thinking around how brands are built and the meaning of things like loyalty and the value of building loyalty versus the value of attracting floating customers, the long tail of floating customers. And there are some surprising thoughts flowing up in that. So that has really challenged, I think, and it's very widely referenced work, and that has challenged the thinking on brand loyalty. Also on things like the brand site. It used to be believed brand metrics were your leading indicator of sales. So if you had high awareness, high consideration, you would have high sales. And that's been called into question. But so actually, what happens is we buy something, we're therefore aware of it. And so actually the causality runs in reverse. It's that big brands have high awareness and it just goes together. It's not that high awareness causes big brands, if you like. So the whole world, I think our understanding of how brands grow is evolving, and it's contested. We're not doctrinaire on it, but it is. There's more than one school of thinking now, I think it's fair to say, on this.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. Moving swiftly on, because I know we're nearing our time here, and I wanted to go into decision-making and confidence with you all. This isn't a personal question, but how do you build confidence in measurement outputs, especially with senior stakeholders or finance teams?
I'll come out from a technical view, and then maybe Rebecca, you can talk about the client view. I think from a technical view, confidence comes from transparency. There's the worst view of econometrics is that it's a black box. That we give these people a load of data and then they give us some answers at the end. That's not how econometrics should be done. The way you build confidence in it is you bring people along with it. So you show them the data you're using, you show them the analysis you're doing, the assumptions. Whenever you're building a model, you're making a whole number of assumptions about what you're doing. You're making judgment calls. You're understanding limitations. if you bring the client along on that process and explain that to them, it can be slightly uncomfortable to start with, because some clients will think that it's a black and white thing, but it's not. Modeling is very much in the grey area of choices we're making all the time. So I think that transparency through the process just means people understand how it's gone from a load of data inputs through to a load of recommendations or insight at the end. So I think from a technical point of view, it's not a black box. It is a process. It is a thing we can talk people through. We can sit there on calls and show people, if we do this happens, but if we do this, something else happens. Which one intuitively feels right to you? We feel like it's this one, but if you've got some other sort of analysis or research that disagrees, then great, we'll go with that. So yeah, for me, the key thing is transparency on the technical side.
The thing that I would ask is, I don't think that confidence comes from the perfect models or the perfect insights. It comes from people understanding how to use them. And that's where, when I go back to my what's your question, the stakeholder engagement that we do, some of our clients vary wildly in terms of their technical knowledge about econometrics. So we have some very technical clients who are all over the work that we do and fully into the insights. And then there are people that first experience of econometrics and think the more that we can support people through the process of understanding what it actually is, how it works, ensuring that their thoughts are taken on board when we're doing the modelling, giving additional value from the questions that they want to know and proving or disproving some of the theories that they have about things, the more people buy into the process. And obviously we're here to answer questions, no stupid questions. We just rather people feel that they can come to us. And I think that's where the relationship really holds its own. So it's not just about turning a handle, churning out a model at all. We're really focused on, okay, these are the results. So what? What does that mean? Does that relate to your questions that you asked at the beginning of the project? Who cares? What does this mean? What does this mean for different teams? Because sometimes there's quite political, something that we have to field. There's obviously different teams are invested in the different outcomes, and we navigate that and we support the clients through that and then help them. Once they've digested all the information, okay, what's next? What's reasonable? What's the plan? And how can we support you with that?
I think I'd add a third factor to that, which is the senior engagement. I think often depends on us passing the idiot test, which is senior people trust their instincts. They've got to where they have, and they've got a lot of experience, which shows up as gut feel. And I think they want to look in the whites of our eyes at some point and understand that we know what we're talking about. We listen, not that we've got perfect answers and complete answers to all their questions, but that we understand nuance, risk, their operating situation, and that we know what we're talking about when it comes to our side of things, the modeling, the measurement. And I think once we've had that conversation, I'm constantly concerned if we don't have that conversation at some point in an engagement. If we're not having that exposure, it makes me worry. But usually at some point we are introduced to the CFO, whoever the CEO, who just wants to have a chat and see what this project's about and find out how it's all going and the rest of it. And I think that's a key moment for us to really show our chops and prove that we're credible, and therefore the work that we do should be taken seriously.
I couldn't agree more. I think the amount of times I've seen proposals and statistics of success and all this data, or even just a well-written email to someone, they don't care. They don't care until they meet you and they understand who you are and trust you. It's all nonsense, because anyone can bring this stuff up really too, or they're just too busy to look at stats. There's analogies there, definitely, from what my role is as a sales director and what you guys do as well too. Yeah, I've hours of sitting there going, oh, should I write this, should I write that? And then this is ignored anyway. So nothing beats a face-to-face meeting. My closing question is, if there's one thing organizations should change about how they use measurement, what would it be?
I'll go first then. I'll keep it really simple, I think. For me, it's don't treat measurement as a reporting function. Treat it more as a decision system, a way to make changes in your business.
I was obviously going to say that, but
Of course you were.
So my answer was really about, I think it's using the measurement, get a baseline and then test, and then you can see what's working, but you've got to know what the status quo is to find the improvements.
I think I was obviously going to suggest that because we are clearly all on the same page and aligned. So that would be my first answer. But my second almost as good answer would be about getting beyond the numbers and understanding, having a mental model of the way your category your brand, your market works. What we're trying to do really with measurements are just facts, and we're not, in the world we're in, we're not short of numbers, measurements, facts, opinions, views. The bit that's missing is filtering those, discerning those, and turning them into what we think is the truth, what really affects, what's really going on here, and what matters. And I think moving beyond that, let's take things passively. So it does relate to what Sam was saying about passive reporting, and actually thinking about, look, what's material in this situation, what's going to affect the decisions that I need to make, and understanding therefore how things work, the underlying dynamics really. That would be the thing I would say to most clients is don't be happy with just a surface level, get below that level.
That's perfect, guys. Thanks again. And yeah, more or less all in agreement, which is good. How can my listeners get in touch with you all, either as an organisation or as individuals, moving forward if they want to get in touch?
So our website has a contact and it has a phone number on it. No fax. There is a form on the website, which unbelievably people actually do use to contact us. So you won't be the first, and that will get to us. Or reach out to us directly on LinkedIn. We're all on LinkedIn. Ping us a line, connect. Tell us what you want to chat about. We're very accessible. So we'll be on the phone in minutes.
That's awesome. Thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate your time. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Josh.
Appreciate it, Josh.